I'm delighted to introduce to you the term scope of practice. It is an interesting term. If you're a follower of any of the forums out on social media, I'm sure you've come across teachers who say, can I teach this with my qualifications? Am I insured to teach this? What the scope of practice does is put all those questions to rest. What it does is say to you, effectively, what am I able to practice, i.e., what am I able to teach, and what do I need in place to be able to teach that? So the definition of a scope of practice refers to those activities that you as an instructor are licensed to practice or teach. It's the activities that you're permitted to perform. And these are increasingly pressured by different rules and regulations coming in, and especially from different professional bodies. Ultimately, scope of practice and deciding what you can practice comes down to you as the teacher. And I just want to give you a little bit of an example around that. I see questions quite a lot from instructors in the workplace who say, oh, I was asked to teach this session for pre and postnatal. I've never done any training for pre and postnatal. I don't have the skill set. I've been asked to teach something for disability. I've been asked to teach something for conditions. What the scope of practice does is clearly give you the decision-making power to say, actually, within my scope of practice, I can do this, but I'm not yet able to do this. I might like to do that for the future, but at this current point in time, this is my scope of practice. So all those questions that you see people asking, what am I able to teach? Actually, we as instructors know what we're able to teach because we know what our competencies are. And that's often an answer I give teachers. In your scope of practice, what is it that you feel comfortable teaching? And when you step out of that and you go into teaching something you're not quite so comfortable with, how do you feel about that? Do you feel exposed? And it's those sort of things that this scope of practice will get rid of for you. Your scope of practice, in simple terms, it defines the limit of your knowledge, your skills, and experience. So I want you to think of all three of those things. If I was a midwife for 20 years, and I suddenly decided to take a group exercise qualification, I would be qualified as a group exercise teacher. Now, the question when we start to look at regulation is, if I want to teach pre and postnatal women, I'm very often told that I have to go back and get a pre and postnatal qualification as well as my group exercise qualification. However, my life experience, my skills, my whole career far more qualifies me to teach pre and postnatal women than a small fitness qualification does. So what the scope of practice does is allow you to evidence not only what you're qualified in with the professional standards, but also what skills and experience you can bring to the table, which we can celebrate with you and evidence into your scope of practice. Because it's our responsibility to make sure that we work within scope of practice. Another question that's often asked of us at EMD UK is, what am I insured for? And I see again this on a lot of forums. What am I insured for? Very often you'll get somebody answering it on a forum who says, well, you know, such a body's insurance covers me to do that. 9 times out of 10, an insurance company will always say, if you're trained and qualified to do it. Now, at that point, they never really delve in and check it. They're leaving the decision with you. So often the decision you make is based on what other people tell you to do. So if I'm a personal trainer, am I qualified in group exercise above 6 people, for instance? Very common question, very commonly asked. So the question is, in your training, in your experience, in your knowledge, have you covered training and developed the skills to teach a large group over 6 people? That's the big question. Now, if you've said to your insurance company, oh, I am, they'll go, well, great, you're insured. So really understanding your scope of practice and making sure that you work within it is something that we all need to be able to do. So I want you to move away for a second from thinking about what qualifications do I hold and think, what am I actually able to teach and what do I feel is within my scope of practice. So when deciding whether a particular activity falls within your scope of practice, or when moving to a new scope of practice, you need to consider those things, because if something goes wrong, you will be the person who has to evidence why you felt able to teach those things. And that is the limit of your knowledge, skills, and experience, because you bring that whole rounded approach to the table. What is the current scope of practice? The current scope of practice is based on what we call the professional standards. So there are two professional standards that sit within the group exercise practitioner world. One is the level 2 core group exercise instructor. The other is the Pilates practitioner. Now, those are the only two professional standards that have been currently agreed and worked on within the sector. And CIMSPA are the guardian of those standards. Now, those standards, quite rightly, are brilliant standards that say, what must we all have as a minimum requirement to be safe in the exercise world teaching? However, I want to give you an example. If you hold a level 2 group training certificate or a level 2 exercise to music, on the scope of practice statement within the professional standards, there's a list of probably 40 different disciplines that the standards say are within your scope of practice. Now, my question to you as a group exercise instructor is, were you taught all 40 of those within your course that qualified you as a group exercise instructor? So it brings in things like Pilates, yoga, it brings in branded products like Zumba, Les Mills. You're not necessarily taught all of those things. So whilst that exists within the professional standards and the right to do that, deciding whether you are able to do that is entirely your decision, and you have to evidence that you can teach that. So what the scope of practice currently does not do is define lots of different areas of teaching. It just is one professional standard that says, if you've got this one recognized qualification, you can teach everything in the studio. And I'm sure some of you have experienced that when you go to get registration against the professional standards, you either meet it or you don't meet it, or some people are turned away and asked to meet it differently. Now, the professional standards, because they orientate around one qualification, but in realism, we have hundreds of disciplines that we teach, there is a limitation. And the limitation currently sits around what we call the 3 R's. The professional standards do not necessarily represent all the genres or types of group exercise that you currently teach. Now, because of that, they also are not reactive. So if we have something that is new and current and we want to react to that and start to bring that into our teaching, and I'll give you an example of wall Pilates. Wall Pilates came in very recently as a trend that people wanted to teach. Do the professional standards allow you to teach wall Pilates? So that's the question. So we want the scopes of practice to be more reactive, and the current professional standards cannot flex enough to be so, because it takes years to agree them. So therefore, we become non-responsive. We don't respond to the needs of our clients. We don't respond to the needs of the communities. We don't respond to the needs of equality, diversity, all of those things that we need to respond to with our ability to invite all of those participants into a group exercise environment. So the current standards, whilst they underpin the excellent professional standard that we should all achieve, they do not define scope of practice, and therefore leave everybody a little bit exposed in their professionalism. Now, what the new approach that EMD are taking to their professional membership in terms of recognizing scope of practice, we are breaking it down into the defined parts. So if there are 50 different genres of group exercise, there will be 50 scopes of practice. And what we'll be doing is working with teachers across the country with employers, with education providers, to define as many scopes of practice as we can, so that we can offer those scopes of practice in celebration of your difference in your teaching, but they're underpinned by the professional standards. Now, what this looks like, it gives us a future that defines safety. It makes us proportional and inclusive. So I want to give you an example for that. If you want to teach one Zumba class on a Saturday morning, because that's your passion and that's what you want to teach, we're no longer going to ask you to go and get a massive qualification that asks you to teach 10 other things that are not the Zumba you have that love and passion to teach. What we will do within the scope of practice is we will look at what you do teach, look at what you have to teach that, i.e. the Zumba bit, and then we take the professional standards, safety elements, and we bridge it for you. So there will be a bridging qualification that is smaller and more proportional, where people can put the two bits together. They can put the bit they love next to the bit that makes them safe, and they can get it and therefore celebrate their success. We have approved a number of scopes of practice already, and I'm going to take you through those. And what these scopes of practice do is they champion you as the instructor, celebrate your successes, and say to employers that these instructors who have been recognised have gained professional recognition for their scope of practice in what they do. And that's a very key, important difference. No longer are we saying that to be a member of your national governing body, you must hold just the one qualification. We are saying, let's have a look at what you do hold, and let's have a look at what that allows you to teach, and we will give you professional recognition within your scope of practice. And therefore, we support and celebrate group exercise across all communities, and we open the doors for a more diverse workforce where people want to come in and teach A, and they want to teach B, but they don't want to teach Z. So professional recognition going forward now in the group exercise sector, recognised by your national governing body, will be based on your scope of practice. And for that, we have issued some scope of practice statements. Where people might have a little gap on their proportionality, there is going to be a bridging available, and training providers will be able to offer that bridge. And that really underpins the safety elements of learning about the body, the anatomy and physiology, the health and safety, the communication. So we will be currently accepting a broader and wider range of certifications, qualifications, experience and skills. So you will have to jump through less hoops, because it'll be our job to look at your scope of practice and say, great, this is a really professional person for teaching what they want to teach, and therefore we will recognise it for professional practice membership. So I'm hoping now you can see the page on the EMD website. So we have currently issued about 7 or 8 scopes of practice statements. One is group exercise, the traditional group exercise based around the professional standards. We've issued it for Pilates, Pilates Reformer. We've issued it for fitness yoga. We'll be shortly issuing others like Clubbercise, Fitness Pilates. We'll be issuing it for KFA, for Maydao, for FL Exercise. We'll be issuing it for lots of genres of fitness that you currently teach, that you will now be able to gain your professional recognition membership for. This is going to grow. This page, hopefully, will end up being the 3 R's. It will be reflective of everything that you teach. It will be reactive to currency and what we need, and it will be responsive to your marketplace in what you want to teach.